Clark fire away and hits a three.
Their left hand.
Clark just spins away from Hayes, fades, fires and hits.
What a tough two.
Clark launches and hits.
I'll set the scenario for you now because Friday night's events inside Gainbridge Fieldhouse were more than just a basketball game. They were a reckoning. Caitlin Clark entered the building with something more substantial than a strategy. She came in with a week's worth of fabricated lies, intentional misreporting, and the kind of disrespect that is only shown to those who are too large, too intelligent, and too obvious to be disregarded. She didn't feel anxious. She wasn't angry in the most dangerous and concentrated sense a transcendent rival can be angry. And the entire weight of it was going to fall on every single individual in that arena.
Doing it all on that defensive possession. Clark. Oh! From another stratosphere.
Before we get into a single possession of this game, here is what you need know. Every athlete eventually hits a wall after reaching a certain degree of excellence. It's a psychological wall rather than a physical or competitive one. The instant they understand that the battle is not limited to the court. It can be found at the league offices, broadcast booths, comment sections, and press rooms. It can be found anywhere. It is also unrelenting. This week, Caitlin Clark struck that wall, looked right at it, and then walked right through it. When Clark took a seat at the news conference podium the day before tip-off, she did not back down. She did not turn around with a courteous grin. She destroyed the story by staring straight into their cameras. Because of all the stories that are circulating online about the time I told my mother I wasn't going to play the game, I actually went back and looked. You guys learned about 447 at 520. 40 minutes before you guys, one of the most significant individuals in my life learned the news. She fixed the injury timeline, the precise, verifiable, unquestionable order of events that the media had been purposefully misrepresenting for the entire week. She presented the facts with the composed accuracy of someone who has had enough of being misquoted and seeing lies go unchecked. She made it very evident that the chronology was so severely constrained that the idea of a cover-up was not only incorrect, but also mathematically impossible. That was a superstar serving notice, not a player performing damage management. At that platform, her anger was more apparent than it had been at any press conference this season. And we witnessed it. All of us who were watching witnessed it. That wasn't staged indignation for the cameras. That was genuine, barely restrained, justified rage from a lady who has witnessed the truth being twisted in real time for years while being expected to remain silent. That press conference was also seen by the media outlets that published those stories. By tip-off, all they wanted was for you to forget about it. We never forget. She then went out and pretended to be that way. The following night, Clark's performance against the Golden State Valkyries was more than just a victory. It was more than just a powerful performance. It was a psychological statement conveyed in the language of elite basketball to every media outlet that published the fabricated tale, every analyst who magnified the story, and every member of this league who has ever attempted to fabricate an excuse for shrinking her. The Indiana Fever emerged victorious, winning 90-82. In a way, they tried everything to stop Caitlin. Nakase is the guard stopper, so you have to give her credit. She enjoys that. She enjoys that. She can stop the guards. And she made every effort to prevent Caitlin. It was ineffective. Additionally, just a portion of the story is shown by the box score. Today, we will delve deeper than the box score because the stats don't accurately reflect what we saw. The storyline of the game movie is entirely different. It narrates the tale of a street brawl that is passed off as a basketball game. This one's doors are being entirely torn off. We are recording the physical assault she endured during the first half, the double technical that triggered a terrifying emotion in her, and the moment the opposing head coach stood in front of a microphone following the final buzzer and publicly acknowledged, on camera, that Caitlin Clark is unstoppable. By the time we finish, you will see why this performance falls into a totally other category than anything she has ever delivered. We are tying together each and every one of those threads. It wasn't just Caitlin Clark who performed brilliantly under duress. This was Caitlin Clark waging battle on all fronts at once against a false narrative, a strategically violent defensive plan, and a full week of contempt. Because that's what sets her apart from all the other participants in this discussion. The majority of contestants are capable of managing one fight at a time. Clark was fighting three things at once, the media, the violence on the ground, and her own barely restrained wrath, all of which she turned into fuel. That's not typical. You can't produce or coach that. The authors of such lies will never be able to comprehend that level of competitive identity. We are here to dissect that. We won't allow that to be obscured by the upcoming news cycle. This one will therefore need your undivided attention, so stay focused. Because she deserves every second of it for what she did inside that building on Friday night. And since the mainstream media will be focusing on the most significant aspects of this story for the whole week, let me be very clear about what truly transpired inside Gainbridge Fieldhouse on Friday night. And we won't overlook that. The tension that had been building all night eventually erupted at the very height of that first half. Clark lowered her head, launched a vicious attack on the basket, and pursued a loose ball in Valkyrie's forward Janelle Salon's grasp. Salon didn't simply object to the interaction. She made it personal by stepping right into Clark's face. The next thing that happened was that these two were staring at each other with the kind of intensity that makes benches uneasy. The benches began to slide closer to the ground. In order to prevent things from going totally awry, Veronica Burton had to physically stand in between them. When the referee had had enough, he gave Clark and Salon 2 technical fouls. The halftime altercation with Salon that resulted in the double techs. I was merely making an effort. Did I receive a technical, I see? You did. Well, for the rest, it just makes sense. It doesn't surprise me. Whoa. I might have been expelled. All along, I ought to have been. Alright, so I guess I'll be paying some fines. And both teams entered the locker room with a halftime enthusiasm that was more akin to lighting a fuse than a break. The significance of that double technical for the second half of that basketball game is not being thoroughly examined by any member of the mainstream media. That work is being done by no one. We are here just for that reason. Because this is what you need to know about a generational competitor's psychology. Caitlin Clark doesn't start small arguments. She doesn't fling her body around in an attempt to get into cheap fights. She is not that person. She absorbs all the game throws at her and turns it into fuel, like she has always done. The confrontation with Salon did not occur in a vacuum. It took place at the conclusion of the most draining, frustrating, and narratively warped week of the season. A week in which some in the press row who wouldn't recognize competitive pain if it walked up and introduced itself turned her back injury into a weapon. 4 days, the media circus, the hacking, the cheap shots, and the doubt had all been crushing her. The altercation with Salon did not serve as a diversion. It was the last component. A contender with a build like Caitlin Clark cannot be worn down. You only give her a reason. You don't use tactical fouling and deceptive headlines to force her to submit. She had roughly 17 of them piled on top of one another on Friday night. When she left the locker room in the third quarter, her mental state dramatically changed. She didn't pause, didn't search for a screen, and didn't challenge the defense as she brought the ball up the floor. 33 feet from the hoop, she went straight to the logo and parked. In front of her was a home audience, a tie game with 48 players each. She approached the logo and knocked it down like a layup in an empty gym following a double technical, a week of media nonsense, and days of people openly wondering if she was even healthy enough to be out there. Then, and this is the part that should give you all the information you need to understand Caitlin Clark's true nature, she didn't simply jog back on defense. She turned to Tiffany Hayes, the seasoned guard for Valkyrie, entered her personal space, and spoke trash to her with the cool, collected assurance of someone who is well aware of their position in the competitive hierarchy. This wasn't careless. This wasn't insane. The audience at Gainbridge Fieldhouse erupted in the kind of loudness that reminded us why we followed this sport in the first place as Hayes gave it straight back. We saw an on-court exorcism at that same moment. She took all of that poisonous energy into her body and transformed it into a Logo 3 and icy trash talk aimed at an experienced all-star. This included every cheap foul, every dishonest headline, and every minute of induced uncertainty. In a blowout, that player doesn't get quietly pulled. That is not a player whose injury history is subtly altered by a beat reporter in the area who wants to garner attention. That's the celebrity who walks to half-court with a week's worth of accumulated trash, reminding everyone in the building and those watching from home who she is. She was excellent, in my opinion. You know, one of the things that makes her so successful is that she is an emotional player. And I felt that she managed it skillfully and channeled it in a way that was necessary for our success. You will never witness a more authentic side of Caitlin Clark than that particular scene, as she pulls up from another area code and then jaws fearlessly with Tiffany Hayes. And we have only just begun dissecting it. In 32 hard-fought minutes, she concluded the evening with 22 points, 9 assists, and 4 made threes on 9 tries. Read that back slowly. 32 minutes of controlled surgical dominance, for threes, and 9 assists. Against a tanking club, this wasn't a highlight reel made of empty calories. This was Caitlin Clark destroying a respectable, well-trained defensive team that had a precise strategy in place to stop her, leaving that strategy in shambles on the ground. This is what everyone should know about what happens when Clark performs at this ball-dominant efficiency level. The Fever ecosystem as a whole undergoes a total transformation, not just a little one. Opponents truly fear this Indiana roster when she is hitting cutters with ease, diagnosing in real time, and pressing tempo. And Aaliyah Boston was the one who most exemplified that this evening. We are not discussing Boston's performance in this game enough, therefore it merits its own discussion. 20 points, 16 rebounds, and 8 of 15 field goals. From the first tip until the last buzzer, she had total control over the painted area. Until be clear, this wasn't a boisterous, exuberant performance that had the TV team going crazy. This type of subdued domination only manifests when a player receives the ball precisely when and where she needs it. The talent has always been in Boston. At this level, she is unlocked when Clark finds her in rhythm, in stride, and in the proper places. This club is not only competitive but also a championship-caliber threat when that connection is at its peak. Forget about it. However, the opposing coach gave us the receipts on a silver platter, so we don't have to start this debate from fresh. Natalie Nakase is not an inexperienced bench player who happened to land a head coaching position. This woman has worked as an assistant with the Golden State Warriors, according to her credentials. In the same manner that some individuals study scripture, she studies films. She coaches with accuracy and prepares with great care. And she stood at the podium and revealed the truth after witnessing her team lose 90-82. 18, so based only on their high-quality shots, I felt they did a great job, even if they were only playing off one another. Publicly admitted that Clark made changes to her plan that it was never intended to manage. That Clark discovered the tiny holes in the coverage. Her team was totally unprepared for the precision passes that threaded through windows that shouldn't have existed. And the significance of that admission is immense. Because a left side step back might be the foundation of a defensive strategy. You can examine logo 3 and determine the extent of your willingness to compromise. However, a player who reads your coverage in real time, determines where it breaks, and punishes it with surgical precision before you can rotate is something you cannot plan against and that no defensive coordinator in this league has yet figured out. That isn't athleticism. That goes beyond just shooting. The majority of players in this league will never be able to match that level of basketball intelligence. On national television, you either respect it or feel ashamed. The scoreboard made sure everyone knew that the entire coaching staff made the wrong decision on Friday night. At this point, the Indiana Fever are 4-2. Is in perfect health. Boston just played her greatest game of the year. The momentum isn't anything to discuss. Moving in a single direction is an unquestionable, verified fact. The entire league fears this version of Caitlin Clark. Minutes that are not handled. Not careful rotations. The team-boosting, irate, locked-in, trash-talking, logo-bombing pinnacle version. The person who takes over a basketball game on national television after witnessing a week of blatant hits and small-time politics. Because they are unprepared for what lies ahead, every critic secretly hoped we wouldn't witness this early in the season. We must cherish every moment of it as we are witnessing it in real time. Every writer who questioned her tenacity, every defensive specialist who believed they understood her, and every boss who turned a blind eye as she was being pounded around. Caitlin Clark's clear-cut, straightforward reaction to everything was Friday night. What about the scary part? She's just getting started. You're at the proper place if you've been observing something develop and no one in your social circle understands. We can see what the cameras don't show and say what the commentators won't thanks to courtside leaks. You'll want to be the first to know when the next tale is out, so subscribe and enable notifications.